And we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Tuesday today, not Wednesday, but we are doing a closing show live episode today. And the reason why is because tomorrow I'm traveling and we had to do it on a Tuesday versus a Wednesday because I'll be actually flying in the air. And although that would be really cool actually to host a closing show live en route. Maybe I should do that next time. But anyway, we're not doing that this time. It's Tuesday. Thanks for joining us live. If you're joining us and don't know what this is, the Closing Show Live is a weekly live show. We feature the people of Proposify, sales stars in the trenches, and revenue leaders. The Closing Show Live is hosted by me, Nadia Milani, VP of Marketing at Proposify. And every week we discuss the challenges we're facing, the no BS lessons we've learned, so you can crush your close rates. The Closing Show Live is brought to you by Proposify. So get consistency, control, and visibility into your proposal process. Start your 14-day trial today at proposify.com. So some housekeeping. We just do this really quickly at the top because the same questions usually come up. Sometimes the live will freeze. Just press pause and play again. And you'll be right back in. Yes. You can catch the recording of this episode on proposify.com or go onto YouTube. You can also just type and search for Closing Show Live, or you can listen to it as a podcast. We're on Apple and we are on Spotify, which is great. And today we're giving away 2 books. So we have the author of Stress Less, Sell More. I'm really excited about today's episode. Jeff Riseley's here. We're giving away 2 books today, which is great. And all you got to do is ask a question. And there's going to be a lot of questions because we are talking about something that we haven't really talked about or focused on Closing Show Live this year. And that is mental health. And I think it's like something that we should be talking about more. I know some people do talk about it, but I haven't talked about it yet on the show. And I'm so happy that Jeff is here to talk about it. So if you want to win one of his books, I've been reading it as a book club with my team, and it's been great. Just ask a question today. Hey, Kate, thanks for joining us today. Hunter will be picking the prize at the end of the show. So the winner, so stick around. We are going to roll the prize wheel and we're going to pick the winner. So the daily sales grind is rewarding. We all know that, but it's stressful. So I know that because I'm also managing the BDR team now. So I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to get more stage 1 pipeline. That's stressful. But fear no more. We're chatting with Jeff Riseley, as mentioned, author of Stress Less, Sell More, and also founder of the Sales Health Alliance. So we're going to talk about strategies you can implement right now, today, or this month, or this quarter, to start taking mental health seriously. So you can actually even crush and close some of more deals. So Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hello. It's exciting to be here. It's too bad that I missed the 30,000-foot launch of the podcast. And I'll have to join you next time you're on a flight so we can chat then. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's a good conversation.
So good. So good to have you here. So let's talk a little bit. We're going to jump right into it because sometimes I don't jump right into it and we run out of time. So I want to ask you, you are kind of this crusader for mental health and sales. You are, like I mentioned, the founder of Sales Health Alliance and also the author of this book, which is all about mental health and how to improve mental health and your sales team. So why have you been somewhat of a crusader for mental health in the sales community? So how did all this happen?
Yeah, so it's probably best just to sort of take you back to the original, genesis. I kind of look at it as 2 moments in my life that really changed things for me. One was I was a seller, started in sales probably about 13, 14 years ago now, and classic boiler room type of sales environment. If you're managing a BDR team, it was pretty intense back then. It was 200 hours a day, 2.5 hours of talk time. If you weren't hitting your metrics, you let go very quickly. So very much this sink or swim type of sales environment. But on the surface, I did really well. I went on to be a top rep and an individual contributor, sort of winning all sorts of cool incentives, things that we know about and sort of we think about when we think of sales. But behind the scenes, I was not okay. I had really bad anxiety, insomnia, and I'd get these really nasty panic attacks in the middle of the night. And it was after the 3rd panic attack when I realized that this was not sustainable. This was not healthy. So first thing I did was I reached out to my doctor who prescribed me some anxiety medication, which I tried for 2 to 3 months. And I really sort of hated how it made me feel. Felt like I lost touch with my intuition and my emotions and the things I was relying on to be a top performer. And going to therapy 10 years ago was still highly stigmatized. So I was sort of at this moment in my life where I sort of wanted to kind of lean more into sales because there's so much learning and growth that comes from a career like this. But I wanted to sort of thrive under pressure. I need to learn and build upon what I was sort of doing from a mental standpoint to navigate these stressors. So stopped taking the medication and started to learn everything that I could around mental health. How does the brain react to stress? What are the things that we can be doing at an individual level to take better care of ourselves? So that was sort of Genesis 1, and didn't really share any of this and sort of this personal journey that I was on about a decade ago until fast forward to July of 2018. I'd progressed into different sales leadership positions. I just launched my first sales consulting website, and I was like, here we go, entrepreneur life, really excited. And 3 days after I launched the website, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So life threw this crazy curveball that I wasn't ready for, but it was sort of through that experience when I realized the same strategies I was using to take my mental health and sales and naturally executed on during this next stressful period of my life. And that was Genesis 2. And as I sort of started to think about and reflect on my own career, I realized that everyone sort of describes sales as being high pressure and stressful, and anxiety in sales is not optional. It's really part of everyday life. So why has no one ever helped sellers navigate these unique stressors and these ups and downs in a mentally healthy way? And that was the genesis of Sales Health Alliance, essentially.
That's amazing. That is an incredible story, by the way. So thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing all aspects of that. Kay mentioned, she also has panic attacks. So thank you for talking about that so openly. And you really do mention a lot and talk a lot about things openly in Stress Less, Sell More. What really inspired you to be so open and candid in this book about mental health specifically?
Yeah, so it wasn't anything in particular. It was just interesting. So it started as sort of when I started writing content. I started on LinkedIn and blog posts, and got to sort of 3.5 or 4 years of content. And I'd received such incredible feedback from different sellers and leaders that I'd worked with who've been engaged with my content. And I realized that there was a book here. So I started to kind of figure out a way to put something together that would be accessible to sellers, because as you know, working in sales you're always on the go. It's very, very challenging to even pick up a book these days. So I wanted to create something that sort of accomplished 2 things. One, that sort of slotted into that day-to-day sales role that allows sellers to action these things on a regular basis. And 2, one of the things I found was a lot of leaders, they only really talk about mental health once a year, maybe during Mental Health Awareness Month. So how could I create a resource that teams could read together with 220 ways, so 220 selling days throughout the year, where they could have a touch point every single day throughout the year to keep this conversation top of mind that was informative, actionable, and help to destigmatize and normalize the conversation around mental health and mental performance.
And that's what I love about this. So like you said, there's not a lot of time. We're selling, we're doing other things. But what I love about this book is that it's quick hits, right? So you get like 1 pages, you can read it every single day, and you can get like a really great, just like stories, but also ways of making your day easier.
Yeah.
So things like sales sabbaticals, you talk about that. You talk a lot about like pips and why we don't love pips, and like intrinsic motivations, another one, working hard, but also playing hard. So I love that, because even though we know sometimes these are things that we need to do and think about, we lose track of time and we can't. So I love how everything's super digestible. But you mentioned and hit on a really good point. So teams and sales teams talk about mental health once in a while. Sometimes it's a year. So what is the best way that you can foster an environment, specifically in sales, where mental health is a priority? Like, how does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So I think it really comes down to a couple things. One, it requires us to change or have a better understanding of what mental health actually is. Because when I ask leaders, don't know what your internal definition is of mental health, but when I ask leaders to talk about this, their mental health definition is something much closer to mental illness. So they think someone that is very unwell, very anxious, very depressed, very burnt out. And as opposed to thinking of mental health of what it actually is, which is the spectrum of well-being that we're all fluctuating along each and every day based on what's happening in our internal environment, like our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, as well as our external environment. So the different stressors that we're facing, deals falling through, inflation rates, uncertain economies. So all of these things are impacting how we're showing up each and every day. So That's step one, is understanding mental health. Better mental health is better mental performance, which is better sales performance. And then two, for a leader, it really starts with expanding our view of what performance actually is. So if you think about what a leader might look at every single day, they're in their CRM, they're in spreadsheets, they're looking at dashboards, and every single metric that they're looking at is going to be a lagging indicator. It's going to be volume metrics, opportunities in their pipeline, conversion rates. And as a result, they have a very narrow lens into what performance actually is. And as a result, they're forgetting and missing all of the important data around how's my team sleeping? Are they anxious? Are they stressed? What's their level of self-esteem? Are they eating right? What are all the different other factors that contribute to how that person is showing up and sustaining themselves throughout the day that is going to be impacting performance? So it's very similar to the news, for example. If you think about what all the news channels are sharing news about, the ones that are getting the most airtime, we are automatically going to assume and automatically assign more importance to those things. So for a leader, if their only metrics are on these lagging indicator metrics, they're going to think negotiation training, sales training, discovery. Those are the most important things because there's no attention on the actual leading indicators that are driving that performance because it's not inside their scope of performance. So those are sort of like the key areas that I'd focus on.
So how do you as a leader start focusing on that? So let's just say you're one of those leaders that are just in the dashboard and you're talking about like, your opportunities and like how many are going to be closing and what's like the forecast and how are we hitting it? So how do you change and shift from that focus to the leading indicators? How does that look like? Is it in your weekly meetings you talk about it? Is it in your one-to-ones? Is it a part of every single conversation? Like, how are we feeling today? Like, how do we shift the focus and what are some ways that we can do that?
Yeah, good question. So a couple things you can do. So something I do with my teams, I have a data and analytics partner that we work with. So it's like doing a thorough assessment. So really doing a deep dive into what are all the different factors that could be impacting somebody's performance and their mental health and their well-being, so that a leader and a team has a great snapshot into, oh, my team is struggling with sleep, so let's maybe do a session on sleep. Or my team is struggling with negative thinking, and that's contributing to higher stress. Let's do a session around combating negative thinking. So that's like sort of how I work with clients. If you're thinking at more of just like a basic level, there could be just sending out an anonymous Google questionnaire, 2 questions at the end of each week, just to your team that says, how supported did you feel? How supported were you from a mental health standpoint this week on a scale of 1 to 5? And then what's one thing that I could have done as your leader to move that number closer to a 5? Very basic things that you could do, because then at least you're getting insight into how you're performing as a leader. If you go to Sales Health Alliance, there's another resource that I created. Again, free resource. It's called the Mental Health Traffic Light. So in your one-on-ones, the problem with the question of how are you feeling this week that a lot of managers sort of use as this basis to kind of check in on their reps, it's not effective, because when someone is stressed and when someone's overwhelmed, it's very hard for that person, because the part of their brain responsible for language is going offline. It's very hard for that person to get past an answer like, other than I'm fine, I'm doing okay, I'm good. So instead, by providing a traffic light visual, which is red, yellow, green meaning I'm thriving, I'm doing well, yellow, I'm treading water, red, I'm drowning and I need some help. By providing that visual, it allows you and the rep to have a starting point to actually have a conversation saying, oh, I'm a red and I feel like I'm drowning. Okay, well, what's one action that you can take as an individual, and what's one action I can take as your leader to help you move you closer to showing up as a yellow tomorrow? So it's having conversations like that are action-based approaches around mental health that starts with data, starts with diagnosing how someone is actually doing, to then really advise that strategy going forward.
I absolutely love that, by the way. So I'm taking that and I'm implementing it this week. So just a quick just poll on your team. It can be anonymous, of how did I support you this week and how can I, as a manager, support you moving forward, specifically around mental health. So I love that idea because it's anonymous. If they're not feeling great, they might be more likely to express that they, are having maybe some challenges. And the second tip that I loved is like the red, green, and yellow of how you're feeling in your one-to-one, which is more visual. So that's great. So your book is Stress Less, Sell More, but there's actually another part of the title, which is 220 ways to prioritize your well-being, prevent burnout, and hit your sales targets. So I love it because 220 days is the days that are related to the selling season. But I'm just curious, like, how does burnout even look like in sales? Like, what are some of the early signs that somebody might be burnt out? And I, as a manager or a teammate, maybe I'm an individual contributor that may be noticing something. How does that look like?
Yeah, so burnout sort of manifests differently in different people, and it's not always clear how well or what stage of burnout you're in. Usually the early signs are going to be things like short-temperedness, more irritable than usual, no longer feeling as engaged or passionate about something that you really care about. So if you used to love work one week and the next week you're like, screw this place, like I don't want to work here anymore, that's, again, you're becoming more cynical of the world around you.
Mhm.
Later stages are things like low energy, different bad habits that are sort of creeping in. But the thing with these burnout assessments online that really grinds my gears is they're not very effective. So if you were to kind of go to, I don't know, if you just were to Google burnout assessment, for example, they'd provide you with a list of 12 or 15 questions that you'd go yes or no, and then you say, okay, I know if I'm burnt out or not. But the problem with these questions is they'll say, do you drink, for example, do you drink alcohol to cope with your feelings? Or are you more irritable than usual? The thing is you could answer yes to that question one day and no to that question 3 days later. So the important thing with these types of assessments that they don't take into account is those questions only become effective when you start to look at the intensity, the frequency, and the duration of those things that are being asked. For example, someone that sort of drinks a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine on a Friday night to blow off steam, where intensity might be high, but frequency and duration are as low, is way different than someone that's drinking half a bottle of wine or full bottle of wine 5 or 6 nights a week. That's a different stage. If you
Right.
think about someone that gets really upset because it hit on sort of a trigger that they have, that is a high intense event. But if they're normally calm and collected, that frequency and that duration is much lower than someone that's waking up angry at the world every single day. So again, if you go to Sales Health Alliance, it's 150 free resources. If you just look at the bottom in the chat, there's a full burnout assessment that you can take to see how you're doing by looking at those intensity, frequency, and duration of these questions to get a proper understanding of how burnt out you're actually feeling.
That's a really good tip. So a lot of the online assessments are not 100%. So if you want to get a pretty good assessment on burnout, go to the Sales Health Alliance. Jeff just mentioned the resource and go check it out. I was burnt out a couple of times in my career, if not more. But like the thing with burnout also is like you don't even know that you're in it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just like you're kind of just acting differently. Things are, you are more irritable, but sometimes you just don't even really realize you're in it. And the first time I was in it, I didn't realize it because I hadn't been burnt out before. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that you have an assessment that can help you understand if whether or not you are burnt out. So leads me to another topic. You had mentioned that the well-being is really important, and you talk a lot about that in the book. There's 220 ways. I'm just curious, like if you were able to distill it in like the top 3 to 5 ways that you can really prioritize well-being, how does that look like, and how can you start doing that today?
Yeah, so a couple things I would say would be, so obviously first starting with the proper assessment, see how you're doing, understand how you're feeling overall, because awareness is the biggest piece. I think probably one of the most important things that a person can be doing in their personal life and in their work life is understanding their blockers. So, or sort of the bad in their life. So for example, there's tons of research out there that talks about how bad is stronger than good. So, for example, if you are in a toxic relationship, if one person or both people all of a sudden start engaging in good behaviors, maybe they take the trash out, maybe they pick the kids up from work more often, whatever they're doing, that's great. But until they resolve the underlying issue, those things will never be as effective as they can be. So understanding what your block is. Another example would be your health, for example. You can start meditating, you can start exercising, you can start eating a salad every day for lunch. But if you're having a pack of cigarettes every single day, that bad habit is still there. It's always going to be impacting how healthy you feel going forward. So until you start addressing whether that's a toxic relationship with your manager, if you start addressing things like poor sleep, so that leads me to this next piece, like foundational needs that every person needs to have met on a regular basis is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. If, for example, even after one night of poor sleep, the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats becomes 60% more reactive, so you're more reactive and stressed out by the things around you. Nutrition, if you're constantly filling your body with highly processed foods, alcohol, too much caffeine, your body's going to be inflamed and not being nourished as it can be. And if you're not exercising on a regular basis, key stress hormones in your body, like cortisol and adrenaline, it's been very hard to balance those stress hormones going forward. So these things really act as really powerful buffers to your ability to manage the ups and downs within sales on a regular basis. So those would be some things in general, sort of where you are, the blockers that you're facing, and then these sort of basic things that we know are important to taking better care of ourselves. But then when you start looking at sales specifically, having a really good understanding of your conversion rate is huge. Like it's so important for salespeople and marketers and whoever to know their conversion rate to a T, not their team's conversion rate, not the company's conversion rate.
I was directly going to like all my conversion like metrics, like my sales and performance metrics. Yeah. But it's not that.
Yeah, it's so no, like the conversion metrics of those sales.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's super important for salespeople to know that, because it allows you to, if you want to think sales as a highly emotional roller coaster with lots of ups and downs, math is non-emotional and very logical. So it's a good way to combat those emotions. So for example, if you know your conversion rate is 10%, for example, let's say you make 20 calls, like that could look like, booking 2 meetings on your first 2 calls and having 18 rejections and no answers. It could look like having a booked meeting at call 3 and a booked meeting at call 15, and the rest could be no answers. It could also look like starting off with 18 no answers and not interested, and getting 2 on the last bit. So by understanding your actual conversion rates, you're able to then remove your emotion and say, hey, like I'm on call 17. I haven't booked anything yet. Math is telling me that I'm very close to having that win that's going to fire up that dopamine to keep that motivation going. But again, a lot of sales teams, a lot of sellers have very murky understandings of their conversion rates that make it very difficult to be predictable and know when that next win is around the corner.
Love that tip. I thought you were going to go somewhere else with the conversion rate. So I'm happy we were like synced on that at the end. So it's really about understanding like what is your actual conversion rate. So if you're a marketer, you're a seller, and know that like even though it might not be great this week, eventually we're gonna get some success. So I really love that tip. Aaron asks, how can we better address the sources of work stress and not just the symptoms? So how can we advocate for ourselves to achieve real collaborative solutions and not just painkillers or band-aids? So what's the best way of really kind of just addressing the solutions and not just the symptoms? So that could be too late.
Yeah, good point. So I think it starts with a couple things. So for an individual, I can't tell you how many sort of teams that I've worked with that I've sort of broken into their or I've worked with that company, not by going directly through the manager, but have been working purely from a grassroots, where an individual rep who's 6 months new to sales saw something that I posted or saw something they liked and said, hey, what about this for our team? And it helps start the conversation. So if you're unsure about the type of environment that you're in, I always recommend starting with like a piece of data. There's different reports in Sales Health Alliance. There's articles coming out all the time around sort of mental health, and just starting with, hey, I noticed that this article by the BBC that talks about that X percentage of employees are disengaged and experiencing low productivity. What do you think about this, or how can we resolve this? And just throwing it into a Slack channel, because what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to get a sense of where your leader's mindset is to, do they think mental health is important? Are they open to engaging in this conversation? And two, even if they don't respond or they don't really care, it's going to allow you to find allies within your own team that do care. It's going to find other reps, other sort of individuals that say, that was a great article, or I agree, this is super important. And then having a side project where the two of you or the three of you or the four of you then go back to that manager to say, hey, us four think this is really important. We should think about doing a session on this, or we should think about doing a proper assessment to see how our team is doing. Because unfortunately in sales, there's safety in numbers. And if there's 2, 3, 4 reps coming together to position this to a manager, that manager is going to be more likely to do something than one person saying, hey, mental health is really important, and them being like, well, I don't care. Like we're not focused on that. So that's one way, as if you're an individual, but to your point, it just starts with having conversations. And I think we might touch on this later, but it's like, it really focuses, like leaders have to lead first when it comes to this topic, and really lean into getting proper data, the same kind of data that you use to diagnose how effective your team is at making discovery calls and sending emails. We need to see how our people are showing up each and every day, because the root cause of inconsistent performance is not the tactics and the tech stack. It is the way someone is showing up inconsistently every single day, and how inconsistent they're feeling throughout the entire day. That is inconsistent performance at its core. All the other stuff, it doesn't matter.
So you mentioned sales leaders. How do sales leaders step up and do this? You mentioned a couple of tips on that. I'm curious, how is it different in a remote world, if at all? Like, is it more challenging to have mental health conversations consistently? Any tips on how to bring this alive in remote culture?
Yeah, so it's, again, leaders need to have those consistent conversations around mental health. It's sharing more openly what they're doing. That's going to help overcome what's called the vulnerability paradox, which is, if I were to ask you, Nadia, how likely are you to be vulnerable to someone who's judging your performance every single day? My answer, or your answer, might be not very likely. So there's this weird dynamic that exists between the sales leader that's judging a person on their performance every single day, and that individual and that leader that needs to have vulnerable conversations to ensure emotions and negative thinking are not getting in the way. So it starts at on a micro level with leaders saying, hey, like, if I'm short with you today, if I don't respond to your Slack message, just know it has nothing to do with you. I twisted my ankle last night, so I'm in a bit of a bad mood, or I'm struggling to get around. It has nothing to do with you. So you're looking, and it's leaders getting ahead of bad habits and things that they're struggling with, sharing them more openly. So one, helps create this idea and this space where people are able to be vulnerable, but two, doesn't result in an action happening that gets misperceived and impacts the trust and safety of that team. Again, if you're a new parent, it's saying, hey, like, if I'm not with you, if I feel disengaged today, it's because my newborn kept me up all night. It's not you, like, that's me. And having that consistently, the research and the data has shown that it inspires others to lead with vulnerability and be open and comfortable with sharing as well.
Kate asked, what do you do if you don't feel psychologically safe in an organization having these kinds of discussions?
Yeah, so that's a tough question to ask yourself, because it really comes down to understanding, is this a temporary situation, or is this a permanent situation that you're facing? So is this a leader that has consistently proven with their actions that this is not a safe space, or is this something, or maybe they're struggling with something that is impacting that's more temporary? So it's a difficult sort of question to answer, but my sort of rule of thumb is really understanding how to communicate the actions that are impacting your mental health. And that the key is to always connect it back to an action and conveying the impact and then providing a suggestion. So if, for example, this might not necessarily be relevant to something that you're going through right now, but on a very basic level, if let's say every single day your manager is sending you a pipeline asking you for your numbers at 4:30 p.m. at the end of every single day and saying, hey, like, what are you going to work on tomorrow? And you're saying, that really stresses me out. And this is, so you've identified that as one of your blockers. You've connected to that to an action. It's saying, hey, so-and-so, when you send ask me for pipeline updates at the end of every day, it makes me feel anxious, meaning that I'm not able to action these suggestions that you're providing until the next morning, and that's going to impact my ability to sleep and show up well rested. Would you be open to having this conversation or sending me this email at 8:30 in the morning so that I can action it right away and lead with that insight going to the day? So not necessarily the best example, but you get what I mean, where it's just, what's the action that they're taking that's impacting your ability to feel safe, or the thing that's causing you to be stressed out, connecting that to the impact that it's having on you and your performance, and then providing a suggestion that would help convey to that leader an action that they could take that would fit and align better with what you need to feel like you're being supported.
Love that. So let's talk a little. So in psychological safety, or the opposite of that is the PIP. Lots of talk about PIPs online. I see a lot of this narrative play out on LinkedIn. Why are PIPs the worst for pretty much everything when it comes to sales? But we still use it organizationally, not here at Proposify, but many other sales leaders use it. What are your thoughts on PIPs, and what's a better solution?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to my friend of mine, Stephen DeGroot, sort of coined this term. It's sort of a moral betrayal, if you want to think about it that way, where you've decided to work for an organization, and this leader and this manager has conveyed that they're morally there to support you, they're on your side, and the PIP is just the clear line in the sand that they are essentially giving up on you. And it's the same as hitting a computer that has a virus and throwing it away without approaching the situation with curiosity and a willingness to understand and diagnose what's going on. That's why data is so important. There's lots that I could say about PIPs, but if you think about what humans need to thrive at an individual level, like, humans have thrived and survived for thousands upon thousands of years, and that's due to our ability to connect and belong in a tribe. And that PIP is pushing that person to the outside of that tribe, the outside of that sales team. And that is ultimately going to shift them into a state of high stress and fight or flight. And if you truly desire high performance and you want to get that rep back to a place where they're performing at a high level, it's impossible for that rep to perform when this high stress scenario is shutting down their ability to problem solve, to be empathetic to buyers and customers, to problem solve. That part of the brain is going offline. So PIPs are just ineffective. They're just a lazy, like, inhumane way to manage someone out of an organization. And if I were in a leadership position today, I'd be having a conversation that's more humane. And it's okay for reps to not be engaged and not motivated each and every day, but it's having a conversation around saying, hey, like, it's okay if this isn't a permanent stop for you. This could be a bus stop. This other things might be going on. Is it sleep? Is it sort of different areas outside in your personal life that I can support you with? But ultimately, if this isn't the right fit for you, that's okay. And let me use my network and let me work with you to find a position or help you find a new job that's more aligned with your core values and the products you believe in. That's a way different conversation than saying, hit this number, you're done, which is then going to communicate to all the remaining reps that this is an unsafe environment if they don't perform.
Such a great way to have a humane conversation. I love that. And Jeff, just like that, we're at time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned a lot. I'm actually going to implement a couple of things that you mentioned today, specifically the survey at the end of the week on how I've supported my team. Hope everyone that joined us live today enjoyed it as well. But we are going to give away 2 of your books, Stress
Amazing.
Less, Sell More, 220 ways to prioritize your well-being, prevent burnout, and hit your sales targets. And if you don't want the book and you want, there's an audio version, right, as well?
There is an audio version. I did not voice the audio version, but there is an audio version.
We can order either or for the winners. So I think there's only been two commenters today or questions. So Aaron Wells and Kate Irwin, you win the book, and I'll get in touch with you after the show to get your copy right away. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Jeff, if anyone wants to reach out to you or get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, just go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest way to reach out sort of me, or through the chat at Sales Health Alliance. But yeah, I look forward to connecting with people. And if you need sort of help with your team and sort of getting them in a state where they're thriving under pressure, that's right in my wheelhouse. So
amazing. Thanks again. Join us next week on a Tuesday. I think we're doing next week is actually a Wednesday. We've got Jen Allen here from Lavender. We're going to talk about how to be an absolute selling badass. That's the subject line. And that's what we're doing next week. So join Jen and I on another Closing Show Live next Wednesday. Thanks everyone. Have a great week. Bye for now.
see ya.